Jim here. So today I'm going to be doing an unboxing of a multimeter that I got recently. I ordered it from AliExpress. It took a couple of weeks to arrive. It's a HaboTest HT118A. So let's start with the unboxing, and while I'm doing that, I'll give you some commentary. Okay, so let's look what we've got here. This is the very first time I'm opening it. I know that's what unboxing should mean. So we've got a, interesting, it says it conforms to IEC 61010. That's good. Typical nondescript box. It says digital multimeter. Good thing. Okay. And so we've got a manual. And we have the HaboTest meter itself. It's a pretty decent size. And there's a bunch of stuff in here. I'll get rid of the box. Have a, this is supposed to be the temperature probe. Got one of those. And we have the test leads. So let's open this up. Let's see if this, okay, doesn't have batteries. So we're going to have to put some batteries in there. There's the leads. Okay, so we got the nice leads, look pretty decent. Well, they're capped off. Okay, well, I'm going to go find some batteries, and we'll pop the batteries in and give it a whirl. All right, got a couple batteries. Decided I'd take you folks through the entire process. So, there's a screw down here. The screwdriver's a little loose. That's perfect. So that's a Phillips number 1 screw. Get the screw out. That comes off pretty easily. Make sure to put the batteries in the right way. Pretty happy I didn't have to take the entire rubber gasket off. That would have been kind of a drag. Let's just make sure that works before we... Yeah, good. Okay. All right. Okay. And there we have it. Got the HaboTest HT118A multimeter. Let's unboxed. Actually, we've got the protective film here. There, that's the piece we want. Okay. Looks pretty nice. So one of the things about this meter is it's supposed to show you which spots to plug your probes into. Just for comparison, this is I have a Fluke 117 here. So you can see it's a little bigger than the Fluke. But displays quite a bit bigger. And of course, it measures a whole bunch of things, and it costs roughly 1/10 the price of the Fluke. So, put the Fluke back over here. It's this is meant to be a second backup multimeter, maybe a third. This one really didn't cost a lot. This HaboTest, it also goes by the name, I've seen it posted on Amazon as something called a Kai Wheats, but it's got the same model number, HT118A. I think HaboTest is the actual original manufacturer. So we're going to start out with some simple tests, do the kinds of things that you do when you first get something home and you just want to make sure it's functioning. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try out the continuity capability. So I've got my probes. Let's turn it on to the continuity setting there. And the spots that I should connect to have lit up. So for a guy like me, that helps. And I'm just going to make my life easier. Take these caps off of the probes. Expose a lot of nice long conductive metal. Now the one thing to notice is that I've got the continuity setting here, but this spot actually has a few different functions. So it's got resistance in ohms, it's got the diode test, and it's got the continuity. So if I just were to give it a whirl now, it's just measuring continuity. So you have to press the function button. We can see now the sound things come on. There we go. So that's a good sign. It works. Now what's interesting is that it takes a bit of time for the light to come on. So the sound comes out almost instantly. Yeah, effectively the sound comes off right away, but the light takes a little bit of time to come on. So that's neither here nor there, because most of the time when you're doing this, you're not looking at the light, you're staring at your circuit board, trying to make sure you're touching the right continuity points. And for comparison, if we stack it up against the Fluke here, turn the Fluke onto continuity. Yeah, that's instant. Of course, the Fluke has no light, so you don't notice that there's anything to complain about. Whereas the HaboTest, the sound is instant, just like the Fluke. But there's a light that comes into play as well. Now, I'm hoping it's just the probes not making good contact. The probes I've got on the Fluke are probably a little bit better right now. So let's just, yeah. So, not a big deal because I don't think you're going to be looking at the light, but it is a little odd that we normally think that light travels faster than sound. Anyways, so that's fine. Next up, we're going to do a side-by-side comparison with the Fluke and the HaboTest, sending some voltage through from a power supply. So just give us a sec, I'll be right back. Now we're going to do a comparison of the Fluke and the HaboTest and the readout on the power supply. We're going to feed in some fixed voltages into the Fluke and the HaboTest and see how they compare. So let's turn them on. We'll go to the voltage there, and that comes on and it's set to DC volts by default. Into DC volts in the Fluke, and you can see that meter's ready to go. The power supply's ready to go. Voltage comes out, and they're pretty much, the HaboTest is matching pretty closely to the voltage that the readout on the power supply is giving us. And the Fluke is saying that the voltage is actually a little lower, about 300 millivolts difference. Now as we kind of bring this up 1 volt at a time, you can see that HaboTest is now matching what's on the meter. Let's bring it up to 12 volts. Here we can see that the Fluke is a little closer to what we see on the power supply, given the number of digits. So there's probably a ranging effect going on. The HaboTest here is a little higher, maybe 2 millivolts. Let's take it down to 11. You can see the Fluke is. Let's take it down to 9. Fluke and the power supply match. 7.99 here. The Fluke and the HaboTest are both reading out 8. Oh, you can see the Fluke is just varying a little bit there. You can see now the power supply is, with that click, it's gone into a different internal mode. Once again, the Fluke is just slipping back and forth between 6.99 and 7 volts. Bring it down to 6 again. 5, this is where we started. There's probably a different ranging effect on the Fluke. You can see that it changed a lot. Here, 5994. HaboTest is at 6. And the Fluke, I think, rearranged, so now it's matching there. We'll bring it down to 5 again. So, most of the time, the Fluke seems to be, except in this case, the Fluke seems to be a little different from the power supply. But you can see that the HaboTest, first of all, I mean, it reacts pretty quickly to the changes. Let's take it up to the top end of the range. You can see now the HaboTest is reading a little higher. The Fluke is sort of almost the same as what's coming out of the power supply. Take it down to 20 volts. So I think that all in all, the accuracy is pretty good for the HaboTest. The Fluke matches the power supply most of the time. The HaboTest tends to read maybe a millivolt high, if anything. And honestly, I don't think that a millivolt here or there in the kinds of work that most hobbyists are doing makes much of a difference. So all in all, I think that's a pretty good showing for the HaboTest. It's pretty responsive. It's as responsive as the Fluke in terms of detecting the changes. So it's a quick meter, and like I said, it's pretty accurate. No concerns there about accuracy. Let's have a look at how the HaboTest deals with non-contact voltage. So we'll turn it up there, non-contact there. We'll do the same with the Fluke. And we'll use the extension cord here as our source of non-contact voltage. You can see that the HaboTest has both a low reading and a high reading. One of the things that's interesting, the Fluke is a little more sensitive at distance. And of course the Fluke only has the one level, and the HaboTest is kind of giving us two levels, the high and the low. So the Fluke may be a little more sensitive, just barely. But the HaboTest gives you a sense of when you're getting closer or further from the voltage. No, who knows with what I'm doing with this cord, what that means. All right, so in summary, I've kind of been using the Fluke as sort of my my gold standard go-to meter for most things for the last couple of years. HaboTest is pretty nice. A couple other things. Fluke has a backlight. HaboTest has a backlight. Nothing too special there. They both have the bar graph scale at the bottom. The HaboTest has the dual display, so fortunately it doesn't have to double up on too many of the settings, although you could see with the resistance and the diode test and the continuity, and kind of doubled those up. Fluke, a little more separation on things. So for example, the voltage, DC voltage, AC voltage are separate. AC voltage and AC amperage and AC current are separated as well. Whereas on the HaboTest, you kind of see that the separation is not between AC and DC, right? The settings will do both AC and DC on the same function, but the separation is between volts and millivolts, or amps and milliamps. So what's interesting is that if I set it up to milliamps, it wants me to put my red spot into the milliamp zone. If I put it into amps, it wants me to use this other one that's fused to a higher level. Whereas the Fluke is a little more auto-ranging in that regard. And you kind of have to know what to do. So there aren't really separate settings here, but you have to make sure to put the probes in the right spots, and that's DC amps, AC amps. So for what I'm doing, it's a little bit of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I'm sure they'll both work. I think the design on the HaboTest for people who are not as technically savvy might be a little simpler, because you have to kind of dial in the range a little bit. Even though it is an auto-ranging meter, you have to sort of choose between milliamps and amps, and then depending upon whether you've chosen milliamps or amps, you'll put your probes into different spots. Not too bad. One thing, I'm not sure if I've shown this already, the HaboTest also has a light. So if you're in a dark spot, not only can you light up the display, you can illuminate something that you're going to measure, although you might need an extra hand or two if you're using your multimeter to light up the scene. All in all, I paid less than $40 for this off of AliExpress, and that's Canadian. So that was a pretty good deal. One thing I would say is that it just, I mean, you can probably see it looks a little chunkier than the Fluke. The Fluke is a nice little meter, feels comfortable in the hand. I'm not so fond of the way they've done this grip, but like I say, for the price, I don't think I would definitely buy it again. It does a lot of good things. I think it'll make a really great second meter.